Hi, and welcome to this brand new session on storytelling. I'm sure there are times that we feel that there is something like at the back of our minds, and or maybe we know about it as if we know it very instinctively, but we are not able to explain it or discuss it or debate about it in any manner. So therefore, we get into the feeling of being overwhelmed. If this happens to you, when I ask, throw in two words: stories and storytelling, the same feeling of overwhelmedness would be possible for a lot of us, including when I came across the word story and storytelling, and I said, like, I know what a story is, I know what storytelling is, and like, what's so great about it. But as and when the exploration and the stuff started, and the learning process, essentially, that is when I realized that beyond merely knowing a story, what a story is and what storytelling is, there are a lot of science that is attached to it. Therefore, if you are feeling overwhelmed, like we or me felt when we were introduced to words story and storytelling, business storytelling, data storytelling, and a variety of other terms like it happens. So just to remove that overwhelmness, this session aims to remove that and talk about the stories and storytelling and what goes into it. I'll be with you in a bit. Welcome back. As a first, let us look at the definition of a story. Generally, there are a variety of definitions that can be, but the simplest ones for us to identify and understand, there are three, which will give you the entire picture as to what a story actually is. Like, a story is an account of incidents or events. And that's the simplest definition that you can find. A story is an account of incidents or events, or a story is a fictional narrative that is shorter than a novel, like a big novel, like Sidney Sheldon or Robert Ludlum, that writes a huge novel. Like, they are writing a story, multiple stories into one. Anyways, but the definition that is more elaborative and at the same time not complex is that a story is a statement regarding the facts pertinent to a situation in a question. That basically looks a little better to me when it comes to about talking about technical things, and like we are supposed to go towards the data analysis and visualization and data storytelling and designing of narratives, etc. So that is when a technical definition Like a story is a statement regarding the facts pertinent to a situation in question. So, what it basically tells us is like a story has to have a context. We'll talk about that in the coming parts. But let's start with the next step of exploration and things that we need to figure out about stories. So, generally speaking, any story, whether it is a fiction or a non-fictional story, okay, has to has three core parts to it. A, it has to have a beginning. B, it has to have a middle. And C, it has to have an end. Now that is not rocket science, but beginning and a middle and a end in their story to make the story interesting or captivating or getting imprinted in our minds for a long time to come, or to be known as good storytellers. So the craft of movie making, like the reason why a lot of emphasis is given on the kind of script and the translation of the script into the actual uh, actors enacting the script. So that is the way a story has to be shot and told. But then comes the huge editing part. Just like what is going to happen to this video and any other video shoot of any kind, there has to be a certain level of editing that is required. So when we edit the video, a lot of other things like that are not required, the way the first part or the second part needs to come in first and what needs to go in last, that can be decided when the story is being told in a interesting way. Now that is something that is required. But interestingly, like I was saying, like storytellers, good storytellers, never stick to this particular rigid formula of uh, a beginning, a middle, and an end type of a narration. Good storytellers use a variety of variations to tell a story. They mostly depend on the kind of plot that they have or a storyline they want to narrate that. Further, to know that the storyline or the plot, it's interesting that there are only 7 types of plots. We'll be talking about the 7 types of plots in the upcoming videos as we require to develop the narratives and the stuff that is attached to it. And so to say, like it is the basic permutation and combination of the 7 types of plots or storylines mixed with the 3 core parts of a story, the beginning, the middle, and the end, becomes a storyteller's sandbox, the playground. Let me relate to you another important aspect before I move on to the next section of this video. A story, apart from the storyline and the core elements, so has to have a character. a protagonist. Somebody has to be there. A problem, an action that is taken on the problem, and then the solution of that. Let me go back and revise that. A story necessarily has four elements. It has to have a character, it has to have a problem, it has to have a action that is taken on the problem, and then the problem is solved, so that it has to have a solution. Now, depending upon the context of the story and the medium it is used to express, whether it is audio visual or only audio or otherwise, like these four elements of a story will always be there apart from the storyline and the core parts of the story. So this is important to remember, that there would be four elements of a story in any kind of a story, whether it is fiction or non-fiction or any type of story that we are talking about, which is a section that focuses on storytelling. Even storytelling pretty much speaks for itself. Storytelling is about using stories or to engage our audience. Right. The storytelling helps storytellers to make complex ideas, perhaps to make them very clear and lucid, because we remember stories as such better. Storytelling helps in a variety of ways because of the affinity that people have for stories, including myself. Like when growing up, my grandmother and my mother all told me bedtime stories, and like that's how we grew up. Okay, so people love stories, people remember stories, and people connect to stories. So, having said that, let me familiarize you with the storytelling definition. According to the National Storytelling Network of the United States, storytelling can be defined like this. Storytelling is the interactive art of using words and actions to reveal elements and images of a story while encouraging the listener's imagination. Now that's something apart from the definition, which were very simplistic about a story, which is a narrative of account of incidents or events, etc. But storytelling necessarily has a slightly more complex and a more elaborate definition to it. So let me go over it again. That storytelling is the interactive use of art, the interactive art of using words and actions to reveal elements and images of a story while encouraging the listener's imagination. Now, storytelling definition can be broken down into three parts. Okay, and it's the three different aspects of storytelling that come together and make it art and science of storytelling. It's okay. So what are those three parts? As a first takeaway, let me just tell you in a nutshell that a storytelling, the first takeaway from storytelling definition is that storytelling is interactive. The storytelling is interactive because it involves a two-way communication between the storyteller and the audience. In that sense, storytelling emerges from the interaction and cooperation and coordinated efforts of the storyteller and the audience. So to say, the audience and the storyteller are normally involved in the effort of storytelling. In other words, the responses of the listeners, like for example, in a workshop, when the workshop conductor asks us the questions about what we are expecting and what we are doing. This is apart from what they have already displayed as an agenda for the day. This is something that he questions us as to why we are attending the workshop and what is our expectation and or what is our learning that we are expecting from it. So according to that response, he would try to customize the day's delivery according to what his audience are. And the presenter, the storyteller or the workshop conductor in this case, keep on doing this to involve their clients, involve their audience in such a way that it becomes an interaction. So this interactive nature of storytelling has its own impact. That's the reason why storytelling is being considered today as an important skill. Okay. So storytelling otherwise directly and tightly connects the storyteller and the audience. That is the reason why storytelling and stories leave such a huge impact on us. The second takeaway from the storytelling definition is that storytelling presents a story. Uh, of course, I mean, like I've simplified that a lot, but the point is, like, without the presentation of a story, there is no storytelling. They go hand in hand. Okay. So when the story is being presented, what is it called? We touched upon this particular aspect in the previous section. It is called a narrative. The storytelling involves presenting a story which is called a narrative. Okay. So a narrative is actually the story's beginning, the middle, and the end. Further, a narrative heavily depends on factors like cultural settings and context. Okay, and of course the subject matter. Okay. Coming to the third takeaway and the final takeaway of storytelling definition is that storytelling encourages active imagination of the listener. Now, what does that mean? Like I said, it might sound a bit complex, but it is actually not. Like, think of it this way: you're watching a movie, and at some point, you actually start identifying or imagining that you are involved in the story that the protagonist is enacting or narrating. And that's how your imagination is active. And in a sense, what that means is that a good storyteller has to be a great narrator. Now let's move on to why storytelling is important. Like, of course, Putting things in the right context, like from a data point of view, like in 2021, putting things in the right context, in 2021, Forbes, LinkedIn, and Gartner reported that people aspiring or pursuing a career in data science must have two skills. A, they must know visualization, effective visualization, and they must know data storytelling. So these are the two most important skills that Forbes, LinkedIn, and Gartner agree upon, that these are one of